What's up, Taiwan? I'm Laurel Stewart with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Taiwan's total defense budget is set to hit a record high next year. The country is facing increasing threats from China, and President Lai Ching-te says Taiwan must be ready to defend itself. Louise Watt has been taking a closer look at what's in the defense budget for us. Louise, Taiwan's defense is always a big talking point. What do we know about the plans for 2025?
Yes, well, once again, Laurel, it's about military readiness. And this budget is notable particularly because it's the first one from the administration of President Lai Ching-te. He's been in power for almost 3 months now, but his party has been in power for the past 8 years. And during that time, they've steadily increased the amount they spend on Taiwan's defense. And so next year, Taiwan's defense budget is set to reach a new high of 19.8 billion US dollars. That compares to 18.6 billion in funding for this year. So crunching the numbers, that equates to around 2.5 to 2.75% of GDP. That's still short of the 3% of GDP that Lai promised when he was campaigning, although he did call that 3% figure a long-term target. But in any case, is this enough to deter China? Taiwan does spend more as a percentage of GDP on its defense than NATO countries like the UK, France and Germany, for instance, but it spends less than Israel, which is also facing an existential threat. Now, aside from defense, other key things in the budget, the largest share of the government pie, if you like, is still going to be spent on social welfare. And in fact, next year, the government plan is to raise spending on long-term care by $150 million to just shy of $3 billion US dollars. That's because Taiwan has to grapple with an aging society, and in fact next year Taiwan is set to become a super-aged society. What that means is more than a fifth of the population will be aged 65 or over. Other things in the budget include more money for combating fraud, for building social housing, and also for better management of water, better water management. So the idea being that Taiwan doesn't run dry in the summer months and it doesn't suffer from deadly flooding like we saw from a recent typhoon. So these budget proposals will be debated from September when the legislature meets again after a holiday break. But the legislature now is not dominated by Lai's party anymore, but the opposition. So parts of these proposals may well come in for challenge.
Thanks for breaking down those numbers for us, Louise. That was Louise Watt, live for us in Taipei. Now, as you just heard, Taiwan's military is set for a record boost in defense spending as the country looks for new ways to invest in its security. Jaime Ocon takes a closer look.
For the 8th year in a row, Taiwan is set to spend a record amount on its national defense. Taiwan's presidential office made the announcement late on Tuesday, confirming plans for the country to spend roughly 19.7 billion US dollars on its military in 2025.
The budget increase speaks to a couple things. First off, that Taiwan is taking its defense more seriously. It's positive to see a year-on-year growth in the defense budget. Ideally, given the magnitude of the threat that China poses, it'd be great to see that get to like 2.5, even like 3% of GDP.
Eyeing the threat of invasion from neighboring China, also known as the PRC, which claims Taiwan as its own, Taiwanese authorities have doubled down on investing in defense. Taiwan's military budget has continued to rise from $9.7 billion in 2016 to now a possible $20 billion. The budget would help fund new training programs for military personnel, maintenance for advanced systems bought from the US, and development of new domestically made weapons. But many analysts say that all of this is still not enough.
Taiwan should be aiming for 4, 5, even 6% of GDP. You can look at countries like Israel, South Korea, and others that face existential threats and what they spend on defense, and Taiwan's just not there. PRC pressure is going to increase over the next 4 years, and all of that takes resources to address. Everything from fuel to maintenance on airframes, and that takes money.
China's military modernization has allowed it to increase its presence in the region, sending fighter jets and warships around Taiwan on a daily basis. While the new funding is aimed at defending against an invasion, some analysts say Taiwan needs to evolve its defense strategy as well, considering other threats like a blockade.
I think the mistake around the focus on it is the singular focus to the exclusion of everything else. Sure, the kinetic D-Day style attack is a very serious challenge, both for Taiwan as well as for American, Japanese, and other military planners as we think about it. But it is not the only challenge.
While an increase in spending should, in theory, bolster Taiwan's defenses, the announcement is just the first step. The budget still needs approval from the opposition-led legislature, and then faces the question of how that money will be spent to make sure every dollar goes to where it's needed the most. Andy Shui and Hameo Khan for TaiwanPlus.
A Taiwanese fisher has returned home to the Dinmen Islands after being held for 4 months in China. The fisher was picked up by the Chinese Coast Guard in March. The man, surnamed Hu, and another fisher had strayed off course in their boat after setting sail from Jinmen, which lies just a few kilometers from the Chinese coast. The other man was released immediately, but Chinese authorities suspected Hu of being a member of Taiwan's military and refused to allow him to return home. After months of negotiations, he was finally reunited with his family. They traveled together with Jinmen's lawmaker Chen to bring him home from the Chinese city of Xiamen.
这件事情就是一个意外，可以顺利解决就好。
US Vice President Kamala Harris has picked Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate for her bid for the White House in November. Appearing together at a rally for the first time in Pennsylvania, the duo is kicking off a 5-day tour through battleground states. Joyce Zhang has more.
A roaring crowd in Philadelphia as U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris takes the stage for the first time with her newly announced running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz.
Since the day that I announced my candidacy, I set out to find a partner who can help build this brighter future. So Pennsylvania, I'm here today because I found such a leader.
A U.S. Army National Guard veteran and former member of Congress, Walz began as a school teacher, also spending about a year teaching in China. When he turned to politics, he became known for winning over rural white voters, a demographic that over the years has leaned towards Republican candidate Donald Trump. Now, Walz is coming into his VP nomination swinging, restating a view that his Republican rivals are, simply put, odd.
I just have to say it. You know it, you feel it. These guys are creepy and, yes, just weird as hell. And make no mistake, violent crime was up under Donald Trump. That's not even counting the crimes he committed.
Even before Walz was shortlisted as a VP pick, the Minnesota governor was branding Trump and Republican VP candidate J.D. Vance as, quote, weird, a tagline that went viral on social media. The message added on to Harris's early campaigning momentum, having raked in a record-breaking over $300 million just in July, since being catapulted to the top of the Democratic ticket after President Joe Biden ended his re-election campaign. Meanwhile, also in Philadelphia, Vance is extending his jabs at Harris to Walz, calling them both dangerously liberal.
He is the double-down choice for failed leadership. And again, Kamala Harris selected him. I don't know why, but I think it's because she's fundamentally a radical herself and she wanted a partner in crime.
Both Vance and Walz said they're willing to debate one another, an event still up in the air for their presidential candidates after Trump pulled out of a scheduled September debate on ABC, a major U.S. network, saying he'd only face Harris in a debate hosted by Fox News, a conservative-leaning channel. With time ticking in an unprecedented election season, stakes are high for both parties.
In these final 90 days, I think both sides have to be worried about everything. There is no way that over the course of the last month, we would have expected what we have seen. We wouldn't have expected a debate performance like Joe Biden had. We wouldn't have expected an assassination attempt. We wouldn't have expected a sitting president to decide that he's not seeking re-election. And we wouldn't have expected J.D. Vance to emerge initially as so compelling a figure in politics and fall so quickly. So I would be very, very nervous on both sides of the aisle. There's no telling what can happen.
With 90 days to go, the new Democratic ticket, Harris and Walz, will be making their way through critical swing states, including Wisconsin, Arizona, and Nevada, while the Republican competition works to do the same as the race for the White House heats up. Chen and Chen for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwanese boxer Chen has won bronze in the women's welterweight competition in Paris. She lost 4-1 on points to China's Yang Liu in the semi-final. It marks Taiwan's 4th bronze medal in this year's Games. It was the 27-year-old's 3rd time competing in the Olympics. Taiwan's Olympic gold medalists and other athletes have returned from the Paris Games. Sandy Chi was at the airport to see fans welcome them home.
A grand welcome for Taiwan's Olympic heroes at the country's main international airport. 16 athletes from sports like badminton, archery and shooting returned home to enthusiastic cheers and applause.
谢谢各位的支持，让我们可以在球场上可以坚持这么久，然后很高兴可以把这个荣耀跟大家一起分享。谢谢。
Before landing, the athletes received a special message from President Lai Ching-te on board the plane.
我要邀请大家用热烈的掌声来感谢各位选手在巴黎挑战自我，展现奋战到底的精神，不仅激励了我们，也团结了台湾。
我们也是很惊喜，可以得到总统的勉励这样子，我们就是倍感尊荣的感觉，所以我们就是真的很开心这样子。
Among the athletes arriving, all eyes are on this year's Olympic gold medalists, Li Yang and Wang Qiling. The badminton duo successfully defended their title after triumphing over their Chinese opponents by 2 games to 1 in an intense match that lasted over 70 minutes. They are the first to claim back-to-back golds in the men's doubles in Olympic history. For Li and Wang, the Olympic journey has been long and remarkable, bringing them unforgettable moments.
可能是在决赛的时候，第3局其实可能体力有点快耗尽的时候，那李阳跟我讲了一句：“你是不是美丽的？”那一句话，我想说，不能被小瞧，对，所以就把气顶了上去。对，
如果是一个瞬间的话，我自己觉得我是亲吻球场吧，因为对我来讲象征告别球场这个舞台。
For 28-year-old Li, the Summer Games marked his final Olympic appearance. He is set to transition into a new role as an associate professor at the National Taiwan Sport University. Meanwhile, badminton player Dai Ziying was also in the spotlight, with fans waiting for her arrival. One even traveled for hours from southern Taiwan, arriving at the airport at midnight, 7 hours before Dai was scheduled to land.
我觉得时间已经不是重点，就是能看到选手们才是一切都是等待都是值得的。那他今年就是带着伤还上场比赛，然后在最后他虽然败给了李胜龙，但是他还是有就是他还是跟大家说，就是他已经尽力了。但我觉得我看到的是，我看到一个超人很努力的在球场上挥拍。
But Dai didn't speak to the public at the airport and left after the group photo.
For these athletes, returning to Taiwan marks the end of their Paris Olympic journey, and they will continue to cheer for other fellow athletes that are still competing in Paris as they strive for glory. Klein Wong and Sandy Shi in Taoyuan for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. Finally, we take you to Paris to watch the Olympic flame rising into the air on a hot air balloon. I'm Laurel Stewart. Take care and see you next time.